So good afternoon, everyone. Our presentation today is on equity and education opportunities. Now, this presentation is being done by myself, Sir Wayne, alongside Miss Sandy and Sir Ethan. Now, over the next few minutes, we'll explore what equity really means in education, why it matters here in Guyana, and what can be done to make our education system fairer for every learner. Now, what is equity? Now, let's start with a basic question. What is equity? At its core, equity is about fairness, impartiality, and justice. It means distributing resources and opportunities in a way that gives every learner a genuinely balanced starting point, especially students from communities that have historically and less access or have faced exclusion. Now, the goal isn't to treat everyone identically, it's to make sure every individual has the tools and support they need to succeed on their own circumstances. Now, what are education opportunities exactly? Now, so what do we mean by education opportunities? Now, these are the pathways and resources available to people to gain a quality education and build the skills they need both for personal growth and for their future careers. This includes fair access to schools, inclusive learning environments, and support services designed around the needs of the different students. Now, these opportunities matter because they're what allow us to build a more, I would say, inclusive society and close the achievement gap between different groups of learners. Now, what's the difference between equity and equality? Now, firstly, equity. Now, people often use equity and equality interchangeably, but they are not the same, and the difference matters a lot in education. Equality means everyone receives the exact and same resources or opportunities, regardless of their circumstances or needs. It focuses on treating everyone the same. The problem is, if we only pursue equality, we can end up maintaining existing disparities because we haven't addressed the underlying inequalities that some students start with. Now, equity, on the other hand, means distributing resources based on individual need with the goal of achieving fair outcomes for everyone. It focuses on addressing specific needs of individuals or groups, aiming to eliminate disparities by tackling their root cause, not just handing out the same to everyone. Now, these are the differences continued from what I just talked about. As you can see here, it's showing us equity and equality, and then we have the different bullet points. Equity, providing resources to students based on their needs, as equality give the same resource to all students regardless of their needs. As I recently touched upon, we can see a fair education system that supports personalized learning. Then equality, equal access to resources. Equity, adapting approaches that meet the needs of diverse learners. And equality, applying a uniform education model for all the learners. Now I will hand you over to Sir Ethan to continue this presentation.
Afternoon, everyone. I'll be continuing from where Sir Wayne left off. My name is Sir Ethan, and I'll be taking over here. So the first topic we'll be going over is factors affecting equity in Guyana. There are four major facts that significantly affect the equitable education opportunities in Guyana. The first one would be the geographic location, mostly between hinterland locations and the coastal areas of Guyana. This basically means that the students living in the hinterland regions would most likely have fewer educational resources or less education opportunities themselves compared to those in the coastal areas or the main areas of Guyana, the most populated. While they have more opportunities or access to more resources, the hinterland would not have that much unless they're being taken to the hinterland, or some hinterland students may come to the coastal areas. The next point brought up would be the socioeconomic status. I don't know if most of you know what socioeconomic means, but it refers to the interaction between the combination of social and economic factors, which generally refers to an individual, a group, or in this case, a family's financial situation. Because families with lower incomes may struggle to afford school supplies, uniforms, transportation, internet, or private lessons for their own children. These financial challenges can be difficult and also affect the students' academic performance in school. And while some can overcome these differences between the socioeconomic status of them and their other peers that might have a better life or a better financial situation, it mostly takes a level of talent or natural gifts when it comes to certain subjects. But do not take this as a grant that all of them can do this. This is only a certain few that have been given the talent from birth, or maybe over time they've gained a little bit of experience with it. The next point I'd like to bring up would be the access to technology. Technology is becoming an essential part of learning because students without computers or internet access are specifically disadvantaged when it comes to let's say online learning. Most cases are online learning taken over private lessons, but there was once a time during COVID where online learning was the base of everything. No, you couldn't go to schools. There was a gap in people because most students, well, I would say most because it was a general consensus that a lot of students had internet or something to use internet on. They would have access to schools and so on the online learning platform. But there were also a few students that did not have any, well, let's say electricity or technology at their home. Some of them would go without electricity, some without a tablet or phone, a computer. And even if they had a few of those things, sometimes they might not even have the internet. So when you're thinking about the access to technology, you need to think about not just if they have a computer or if they have the internet. You have to think about if they would have electricity at home or not. The next point I would like to bring up is the disabilities and special education needs. Because students with disability may require assistive technology, special learning materials, trained teachers, and accessible classrooms. Because without these supports, they may struggle to participate fully in education. And when I say disabilities, special education, I don't mean like those children that you would call them special needs just because they can't perform well in class. There are some special needs students that are very, very good students. They can learn fast. They can pick up on any given topic very quickly. They can solve any problem you give them as long as it's not too overwhelming for their level. So as long as you have the right resources and the right attitude approaching special needs students or students with a little bit of mental disabilities, you can help them or they can learn just as good as anyone else. The next slide I'll be focusing upon is the impact of all of these effects on learners. You see, when students don't receive equitable education opportunities, there are several negative effects. As a few that the previous mentioned would affect students, yes, but those are the major causes. Because the first one would be declining or stagnant academic achievements. I think most would know what this means is that they would either not progress academically, they would not improve any scores in subjects, or they would steadily decline and lose marks. The next points would be to the loss of motivation, and they're less likely to participate in class activities. I would say games and so on, because most schools would have that. Because once they are declining or stagnant in their academic achievements, they would get a bit of loss of self-esteem. They would lose confidence in themselves. They would think of themselves as a bit lesser, but that would not be the case. They still have the opportunity to learn or get better. The next one would be the negative social and emotional developments. Because a student that does not progress or feels like they don't progress and they're only getting worse and worse would only develop the tendencies that might lead to self-harm, or that would also lead to, let's say, negative impacts. They would isolate themselves from their friends, their families. They wouldn't talk to anyone. They would keep everything they're feeling to themselves. They wouldn't let it out to anyone else. No one else would know what would happen here. And the final impact or effect of all of this on current day learners would be that they are less likely to have opportunities like these in the future. Because as time goes on, some of the issues or some of their deficits might get masked. They might try to cover it up because they don't want anyone to know about, they can't learn this certain topic and so on. They don't want anyone to know that they can't learn about this. They don't have the ability to do that because sometimes they want to just mask it. They don't want to live a quiet life. They don't want anyone to know about their problems they had in school. Because students who leave school without the necessary skills may have fewer employment opportunities and lower incomes. That's why all of this is very, very important when thinking about the learners of today. Now, the next slide would be the recommendations for the Ministry of Education. Because some of these actions of the Ministry of Education can take to help delivering the equitable education opportunities nationwide would be to, firstly, implement an equitable education resource allocation program. There could be certain tests taken on some students to allow them to find out what their needs are or what they need to build upon. The next one will be to expand the existing technology infrastructure to improve connectivity between schools and areas far from immediate resources. As I said before, and I brought up the hinterland versus coastal areas, I don't think most hinterland communities would have a connection system or like working it to connect all the schools and so on. So for those areas, you would try and build a connection database, like say build a messaging system or a messaging server where you could interact with other schools so they could have more, let's say, direct resources that would not need to be like physical. They could send soft copies of documents they would need to learn. They would tell them about certain websites they can go to learn about certain facts. Maybe they'll give them a few educational games or quizzes to do in their spare time. And the third thing they would have to do would be to strengthen the special education programs. As previously mentioned, they would not need to just isolate those children that would have mental disabilities. They could also include them in normal classes. But the only thing would be different would be that they would need the teachers trained in special education needs, or also resources that would be suitable for children that fit the special education criteria. Not just because they are mentally disabled or they may have a physical disability, means that they are lesser of a student, there'll be anything else different. And the final thing they would need to fix up or just improve upon would be to reform the technical vocational education. They would need to do so because some students have more career pathways beyond traditional academic subjects. Because some might not just want to be a businessman, might not want to be a scientist. Some of them might want to be a mechanic. We are a few technical education institutes offer electrical installation courses, mechanical courses, welding courses, and so on. They could also improve those opportunities nationwide. Just not certain areas could have access to it. Now, the next recommendations I would be is for schools that, that they can take to just help learners in general. Because some of these methods can help any learner that might need the help or might not want to show that they need help, even if they try to hide it. The first thing would be to implement an early warning system for students that might be falling behind. This system helps identify students who are struggling academically or emotionally before they fall too far behind the rest of the class. The next thing would be to develop a culturally responsive curriculum. Schools should develop this kind of curriculum because it reflects the diverse backgrounds and experience of Guyanese students. Guyana is a place of many nations, many people, I should say, not nations. They have Indians, Africans, and so on. Not because all of us are Guyanese, we all look the same, we all feel the same. We have different backgrounds, we have different religions, different, let's say, ancestors. And the final thing we should take is provide teacher sensitization training for those students that can, well, for those teachers that need to understand their students better because they come from different um, economics backgrounds, cultures, and ability levels. They're all different. That just concludes my part of this presentation. I will now hand you over to Miss Sandy, who will take over from here.
Thank you, Sir Ethan. Good afternoon, everyone. I will be looking at the recommendations that teachers can take to support students. So some actions that the teachers can take to help students that they may need. The first one that we have is adopt inclusive teaching practices. And this is where we can differentiate instructions. We can use visual aids, we can use videos, and also we could provide multiple ways for students to show understanding. The next point, identify and support at-risk students. So here is where we can monitor their attendance, we can monitor their grades, and also their behavior patterns, and which will help us to intervene early, target help. The next point, advocate for the varying needs of students. Here is where we can work with parents. We can also work with SEN officers and administrators to ensure resources and accommodations are provided for those students. Next point. Okay, so the next one is recommendations that communities can take to help those that struggles in school. So there are many ways which the community can help children in school. Some are, first point, establishing community support network. Here is where we can create programs. We can have programs. So after school, the students can go to those programs or even clubs where we can have volunteers helping those students. Next point. Increasing parental engagement. Here is where we can organize workshops. We can have parent meetings and also family learning events to help strengthen the homeschool connection with the students and parents. Next point. We can advocate for educational resources. Here is where we can partner with local businesses, the government agencies, and these will help us to secure fundings and also technology and other materials that are needed for school. Next point. Support culture perseverance. I'm not saying that word clearly. Okay, so here is where we can encourage culture events. We can have storytelling. We can have heritage programs that make learning more meaningful and inclusive. That was all. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you do have any question, you're free to reach out to us. Thank you.